In the winter of 1953, a Soviet geologist named Viktor Tverdoklubov stood on a ridge above a frozen lake in the coldest inhabited place on Earth and watched something rise through the water below him. He was a trained scientist, sent to survey one of the most remote regions of Siberia, a man with every professional reason not to believe in monsters. In his field diary that day, he wrote that a large, dark, living body had surfaced in the lake, moving with purpose, and that its jaws and the spacing of its eyes were unmistakably those of a predator, far too large for any fish he knew. He was terrified, and he was not the first, nor the last, to describe the same animal in the same water. This is Lake Labinkir, in the Yakutia region of eastern Siberia, in a part of the world where the temperature has been recorded at nearly 70 degrees below zero. It is a place so cold that the ground itself is frozen solid hundreds of feet down, where spit is said to freeze before it hits the ground. And for centuries, the indigenous Saka people who live scattered across this frozen wilderness have insisted that this particular lake is home to something they call the Labinkir Devil, a creature with an enormous dark body, a huge mouth, and a habit of dragging reindeer, dogs, and occasionally people beneath the ice. Hold on to that word, ice, because it hides the single strangest question in this entire story. How does anything large enough to eat a reindeer survive in a lake that freezes over for most of the year, in the coldest inhabited region on the planet? By every rule we understand, whatever Tverdoklubov saw should not be alive, and yet the sightings have never stopped. For generations, outsiders dismissed the Saka accounts as folklore, the superstition of an isolated people explaining the dangers of deep, freezing water. But the Saka never treated the devil as a story for entertainment. They treated it as a fact of survival. They warned travelers away from certain parts of the lake. They spoke of it reluctantly, the way people speak of something real and dangerous, rather than something imagined, and that is the first detail worth sitting with. Why would a people this practical, this hardened by an environment that kills the careless, build careful warnings around a creature that does not exist? The answer begins with the lake itself, because Labinkir is not an ordinary Siberian lake. It is unusually, almost impossibly deep for its size, plunging far below what its modest surface would suggest, with at least one underwater trench that early surveys struggled to measure at all. Remember that depth, because it will matter twice before the story ends. And there is something stranger still. In a region where every body of water should freeze solid, Labinkir does not freeze completely. Locals have long reported patches of open water that stay clear, even in the deep winter, holes in the ice that should not be there, as though something below is keeping the water moving, or as though warmth is rising from somewhere far down. That single anomaly, water that stays liquid in a place where nothing liquid should survive, is the crack in the door through which this entire mystery walks. Below the surface, the lake turns to a cold black layer where no light reaches and where sonar behaves unpredictably. Sound scatters and bends in that frigid, deep water, which means an object sitting near the bottom can be almost impossible to resolve from a boat or through a hole in the ice above. Keep that in mind too, because it explains how something could be both present and unfilmable, tracked by instruments one moment and gone the next. So we have a hardened people who built survival warnings around the water, and a lake uniquely capable of hiding and sustaining something in it. For most of history, the evidence was the kind easy to dismiss: a dark shape beneath the ice, a wake with nothing behind it, a story told by a hunter who had lost a dog to the water. And then came Tverdoklubov in 1953, and everything changed, because now the witness was a Soviet scientist on official survey, a man whose report could not simply be laughed away. His account opened the door for others. In the decades that followed, the reports accumulated into a pattern too consistent to ignore. Hunters describing a vast dark animal surfacing and diving, fishermen whose lines and nets were destroyed by something far stronger than any fish the lake was supposed to hold, reindeer and dogs vanishing at the water's edge, different witnesses across different generations, with no reason to coordinate, all describing the same basic creature: an enormous dark body, a broad head, a mouth wide enough to take large prey, and a way of moving through the freezing water that was wrong for anything they could name. When modern Russian expeditions finally brought technology to Labankir, the results were not proof, but they were far from nothing. Sonar surveys in recent years returned large contacts near the bottom of the lake, objects too big to match the known fish, sitting in that deep, cold trench, and then gone before they could be resolved. Divers who descended reported finding the remains of animals on the lake floor, jaws and bones of creatures that should not have ended up there. None of it produced a body. All of it deepened the question. And now we can ask seriously what it could actually be, because the honest answer matters more than the legend. The most grounded candidate is a fish, an enormous one, a giant pike, a taimen, or a Wells catfish, all of which can grow to remarkable size in cold, undisturbed water, and all of which are genuine predators. This is the explanation science reaches for first, and it deserves respect, but it runs into the same walls every time. The size that witnesses describe goes beyond any pike or catfish on record, and more importantly, none of those fish resolve the central impossibility, the one the title of this story promises. How does a large, cold-blooded predator survive year after year in water that freezes over in the coldest inhabited place on Earth? A fish that size needs to feed. It needs oxygen, it needs liquid water, and Labankir, alone among the lakes around it, seems to provide exactly that, through its strange depth and its patches of water that never freeze. Which brings the objection every skeptic raises, and rightly so. If something large lives in that lake, where are the bodies, and how are there enough of them to survive as a population? Here the lake answers for itself. Its extraordinary depth means that anything that dies in it sinks into a cold black trench that no one has ever fully mapped, far beyond the reach of any diver or search. And a deep, cold, stable lake can sustain a small population of large, slow-growing, long-lived predators for an immense span of time, especially animals hidden beneath a lid of winter ice for much of the year. We do not find the evidence because the one place it would be is the one place no human being goes: the bottom of a freezing lake, in the middle of a frozen wilderness, in the coldest inhabited region on the planet. And if the idea of a creature surviving where it supposedly cannot sounds impossible, there is a precedent that is not a matter of belief. In 1938, fishermen off the coast of South Africa hauled up a coelacanth, a large, ancient fish that science had declared extinct for over 60 million years. It had not been hiding on purpose. It had simply been living in deep water. No one had any reason to search, and an entire confident consensus collapsed in a single afternoon. The lesson is not that every legend is true. It is that the absence of a specimen in an environment we have barely touched is not proof that nothing is there, and there are few environments on Earth we have touched less than the bottom of a Siberian lake in permanent deep freeze. Labankir is not even alone. Across the frozen north, deep cold lakes carry the same persistent reports, from Siberia to Scandinavia to the deep lakes of Canada and Scotland. Bodies of water shaped by ice, isolated, barely explored, each rumored to hold something the local people have described for centuries, and science has never confirmed. But Labankir is the extreme case, the coldest, the most remote, the one where the central question is not merely how something stays hidden, but how it stays alive at all. So return, finally, to that ridge in 1953, and to the geologist standing above the ice, watching a dark body move through water that should have been frozen solid. He was not a believer, he was a scientist, and he wrote down exactly what he saw, knowing how it would sound. The folklore that warned the Saka for centuries describes the same animal. The sonar finds it near the bottom and loses it in the cold. The lake's impossible pockets of open water make its survival just barely conceivable. And the depth of that black trench guarantees that the one thing that would end the argument, a body, lies where no one will ever bring it up. Lake Labenkier is still there, still freezing over each winter in the coldest inhabited place on Earth, still holding its patches of open water that should not exist, and its deep black trench that no one has mapped. The rest of the world has never heard of it. The Saka have never forgotten it, and whatever Viktor Tverdoklubov watched rise through that water more than 70 years ago is, by every indication, still down there, beneath the ice, in the dark, in the one lake on Earth, where the real mystery is not how it hides, but how it is still alive. If you have seen something in the water that you could not explain, something too large, too deep, too old for the world you thought you knew, we want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments. Subscribe to my channel for more accounts from the deep.